Good evening and welcome to our fall edition of Schoenstatt Bookends. I am your host, Ed Sanchez, and this evening we have a special guest in Sister Danielle Peters of the Schoenstatt Sisters of Mary. She will be speaking with us today on the topic of the titles of Mary, as recently discussed in the Vatican Doctrinal Note Mater Populi Fidelis, which was signed by Pope Leo XIV on the 7th of October 2025. So we're very excited about that, but let's begin first off with the prayer. O Mother, in your holy heart, deeply inscribe each name, and as a sign that we are yours, write it with blood and flame. In love and childlike gratitude, your name shall also be deeply inscribed within my heart for all eternity. And now, Sister Danielle Peters.
Thank you, Ed, for welcoming all of us. I'm happy to have a little bit of a live audience here to know if people follow me or not. It's a joy for me to address this recent document or note from the Vatican called Mater Populi Fidelis, the Mother of the Faithful People. As Ed mentioned, it is a doctrinal note on certain Marian titles regarding Mary's cooperation in the work of salvation. It was published by the Dicastery for the Doctrine of the Faith on October 7th and published on November the 4th. But it was already decided upon in the ordinary session of the Dicastery on March 26th of this year. So we know that Pope Francis also still had a word to say in this. I have to say I was surprised about this document, even though having worked in the Dicastery for a while, I knew it was coming. But I also didn't think it would come right now. For a long time, and that's what the document also mentions, there were many questions regarding Mary's cooperation in the work of redemption. And there were especially two movements that were pushing for a fifth dogma, a fifth Marian dogma, namely either Mary as Mediatrix of all graces or Mary Co-Redemptrix. And yeah, so I still was in Rome in September at a conference for the PAMI. PAMI is short for International Pontifical Academy of Mariologists, to which I belong. And there was no one talked about this document. So I'm not sure in how far Mariologists were involved, but I know the Dicastery had worked with these questions for a long time. Behind it are two very strong, powerful movements, one coming from Steubenville, Ohio, pushing for Co-Redemptrix. One person who is behind this is Mark Miravalle, Deacon Mark Miravalle. The other one, Mediatrix of all graces, is connected to Our Lady of Amsterdam. These two movements have been pushing for a fifth Marian dogma. And now I would like to go, maybe I have a little anecdote to share with you. When this note came out, I was reminded of the liturgical reform in the early 1970s. Some of us may remember that. And it was here in the United States, here in Milwaukee, that a couple by the name of Yost, known to many of us because they belonged to the pioneers, were concerned. Now the liturgy changed, even the Our Father changed. Will the Hail Mary change too? That was their big concern. Also, they weren't sure about the daily recitation of the Rosary. So they turned to, at that time, Archbishop Cousins here of Milwaukee and made their concerns known. And the Archbishop took it dutifully to the USCCB, the Conference of Bishops here in the United States, who then in 1973 published Behold Your Mother, the document that was very foundational also for us to understand who the Blessed Mother is and what authentic devotion to Our Lady should be like. And I think Paul VI in Rome was very fond of this document because a year later he published Marialis Cultus, which is a letter to the whole church. So Behold Your Mother was for the United States, but then Marialis Cultus for the entire church. And the Pope stressed two prayers in particular, and that is the Angelus and the Rosary. So now back to this note. So it was published by the Dicastery for the Doctrine of the Faith, which used to be the Congregation, and before that, the Holy Office, the same Holy Office that we know about when Father Kentenich was tested and Schoenstatt was tested by the Holy Office. And it responds to numerous requests. Do you have my second slide on, please? So now you see it, right? No, they cannot see the slide here. Okay. It responds to numerous requests and proposals concerning Marian devotion and titles over recent decades. And the aim of this note is to understand that certain Marian titles that refer to Mary's cooperation in salvation can be easily misunderstood. And that is because we are not catechized enough when it concerns Our Lady. And to deepen foundations of Marian devotion, considering Christ as the sole mediator and redeemer. So we also know that the Holy Father, Pope Leo, who was just in Turkey last week, and one headline said he went as Pope Leo and he returned as Pontifex, meaning bridge builder. One of his huge efforts is to unite the church. So it's an ecumenical Pope we have, and that's a good thing. And titles like Co-Redemptrix and Mediatrix of our graces are very controversial when you interject them in an ecumenical dialogue. So what are the key sections of the document? We go to the next slide, right? So the introduction sets the purpose and contexts and clarifies the unique participation in the work of redemption. I want you to have in the back of your mind, whatever we can say about the Blessed Mother, we should be able to say about ourselves. When we say she is mediatrix, we also are mediatrix. When we say she's co-redemptrix, we are also co-redemptrix or co-redeemers. But that is when we look at the subjective work of redemption, when we make up for what is lacking in the suffering of Christ, which is hardly understood in the world, in our parishes, in our Catholic world today. And so that discussion is very important, that we know Mary is not another redeemer, and Christ is the only mediator. But what is Mary's unique cooperation? So titles referring to Mary's cooperation are discussed: Co-Redemptrix, Mediatrix, Mother of Believers. And then there are criteria for this work of redemption. The criteria is that Christ did not need Mary, nor any other saint, nor pope, nor us to redeem us, objectively. Subjectively, he wanted it. And that is a very Catholic thought, but nowadays no longer known so prominently. So graces also come from God. So we also, as Schoenstatt people, maybe have to learn when we say the Blessed Mother gives us these graces of home, transformation, and so on. We have to see what is my audience. If I speak to Sisters of Mary, then I know they understand this. If I speak to a parish whom I don't know, I have to be more careful and say Mary mediates these graces that were merited for us by Christ, right? But normally when I have a parish in front of me, I wouldn't talk about Mary being mediatrix of grace or co-redemptrix, because people will maybe have misunderstandings and not be courageous enough to voice them. So what is our union with Mary? What is it like? That's also discussed. And then the first, Mary as the first disciple, or Mary as the one who, and we celebrate this now on Christmas, mediated the mediator of all graces, right? In this way, she is mediatrix of all graces. But we cannot say that she participated in the mediation of the sacramental graces we received, or of her own graces she received as Immaculata, for example. And then the conclusion of this document highlights some pastoral application, for our devotion, for pilgrimages, and for our faith life. Next slide, thank you. This is the first article, and it's a beautiful one, and therefore I will read it to you. So we may not think that the dicastery or the congregation or the Holy Office are people who don't have a devotion to Mary. And that is proven through this first article here. The mother of the faithful people of God is viewed with affection and admiration by Christians, because since grace makes us like Christ, Mary is the most perfect expression of Christ's action that transforms our humanity. She is the feminine manifestation of all that Christ's grace can accomplish in a human being. In the face of such beauty and moved by love, many members of the faithful throughout history have sought to refer to the mother using the most beautiful words to exalt the special grace she holds at Christ's side. So this is the beginning of the document. But we also know that love makes inventive, and love sometimes tends to exaggerate. How often do I hear of people when they say, I adore my grandchild, or my husband? That's wrong, right? And when we say, I adore Mary, I run away, because we cannot adore created things. But how often do we as Catholics do that? Because we love our Blessed Mother so much. But at the same time, we cause conflict with our other brothers and sisters who are not in union with our church. So love always needs to be connected to God's love. I can adore my spouse through God because I see God in him. But adore must be in quotation marks. So the objectives, next slide, please, of this document is sheds light on the theological and devotional debates, Co-Redemptrix, Mediatrix of all graces. And it highlights that some titles risk obscuring the unique role of Christ in redemption. So when we say Mary mediates these graces, then we forget that actually Christ mediated these graces. And to assist the faithful, the theologians and pastors in maintaining authentic devotion while preserving doctrinal clarity. So here I chose two images, Mary as the new Eve. Of course, she is the one who is in the covenant of the new covenant with Christ. And in this regard, she has a certain privileged position in the church. We not only venerate her, but she has a special way of veneration. But it's not adoration. So the document, next slide, please, has these following key themes. Mary's motherhood with respect to believers. She is the mother of the faithful people of God. She cooperates in the work of salvation, not as a redeemer, but in relation to Christ, as we cooperate. The importance of Marian titles and their precision, the role of Scripture, the fathers of the church, tradition, and recent popes in the reflection, and the emphasis on devotion that leads believers to Christ and not away from him. So Marian devotion, authentic Marian devotion, always needs to lead us closer to Christ. Next slide, please. So here are the titles in question. Co-Redemptrix. The note cautions us strongly that using this title without the proper context, so that is important, is always inappropriate because it risks obscuring Christ's unique mediating role. So, and if you look at this image there, you have Mary, or sometimes I have a next slide where she stands there distributing graces without a connection to Christ. It's questionable. If I have an audience in front of me that's not very Marian or not very educated in Mariology. The title Mediatrix of all graces is also mentioned, and limits and concerns are expressed. So again, for instance, I would like you to understand that our heavenwards is a translation from the German. For instance, we have a prayer in there, Mary Mediatrix of all gifts and graces. The German is Mary Mediatrix of gifts and graces, not all. But I'm not saying that Father Kentig never uses the title Mediatrix of all graces. But also sometimes we have to know the original language in order to judge what the title actually is supposed to mean. And Mother of the Faithful People of God, Mother Mater Populi Fidelis. So this is the affirmed title and the best title, I think, which points to Mary's maternity, her spiritual maternity towards the church and all of us. If there will be a fifth Marian dogma, I would think it will be Mary's spiritual maternity that she received when standing beneath the cross. Behold your son. And that includes that she mediates graces for us and that she took part in the redemption of God's people. But it is not as confusing. So there are needed some clarifications and boundaries. I mentioned before, Christ is the sole Redeemer and Mediator, and Mary's cooperation must be understood in that context, just as our cooperation is dependent and on this context. It reminds us that Mary the document does not add to Christ's redemptive mediation. Christ objectively redeemed us all, but she cooperates with grace, as we are called to do. And as I mentioned before, the document is ecumenical sensitive, seeking to avoid expressions that obstruct dialogue. And I think we as Schoenstatters also have to be sensitive in the spirit of the Dilexit Me. We have to know the audience to whom we talk in order to use the correct expressions. And here is an example. The image, the next slide, please. The image is an Eastern icon. And Article 45 of the note says, Mary is frequently portrayed or imagined as a fountain from which all grace flows. If one considers the fact that the Trinitarian indwelling, uncreated grace, so God dwelling in us, and our participation in the divine life are inseparable, we cannot think that this mystery depends on a passage through Mary's hands. Such notions elevate Mary so highly that Christ's own centrality may disappear or at least become conditioned. So this is what the note says. Now, there are two votive masses on Mary, Fountain of Divine Life and Fountain of Grace. And we have to see this again as an objective statement. Father Kentenich said, objectively, this is what it is. But as Schoenstatters, we are Marian maximalists. De Maria nunquam satis. We don't want it differently. We want it to come through Mary's intercession. So that is how we can see Mary, interceding these graces for us. But it's not for the objective Christian who is a Marian minimalist. They still get graces, or they get them through Christ, right? That doesn't mean what Pope Pius the 11th said, the shortest, securest, and easiest way to get to Christ is through Mary. All these statements are still clear, but in our context nowadays, when the position of Mary is not really clear, we have to see that the Vatican has to make that statement, unfortunately. Next slide. Number 55, and here we have the Lady of Amsterdam, and she is totally alone, right? There is no Christ, there is no Father, no Trinity symbol. It looks like she is giving the graces to the world. One should avoid any description that would suggest an outpouring of grace by stages, as if God's grace were descending through various intermediaries, while its ultimate source remained disconnected from our hearts. Such interpretations carry a negative impact on a proper understanding of the intimate, direct, and immediate encounter that grace effects between the Lord and the believer's heart. So I think the Vatican is correct in making this statement. I hear often that in Mexico, everyone is a Gualapano, but not a practicing Christian. And I think this is meant for people like this, who see in Mary their God. And as a side note, that's why this Palmy conference got a task by the Pope to research the connection of the mafia with the Blessed Mother. How come she doesn't lead them to Christ? But that's another topic for another bookend. So now we come to the pastoral implications and our devotional life. So the note encourages authentic Marian devotion that leads believers to Christ. And here I have to say, Father Kenting makes it very clear in the Marian priest, his swan song that he delivered shortly before going to Dachau, that our Schoenstatt Mariology is Christ-centered. Christ is the only reason for her existence. But we sometimes could maybe stress that a little more. The note also emphasizes Mary as mother of the faithful people. And I think this is a much warmer title than Co-Redemptrix, maybe subjective. She draws near believers and they can entrust themselves to her. That's why we make a covenant of love with her. The note cautions against exaggerations or imprecise titles or expressions which may cause confusion. And the faithful are invited to pilgrimage, prayer, trust in Mary's maternal intercession. So for us, nothing changes. Maybe we have to become a little more alert to the people in front of us and how we can explain Mary's position in the work of redemption. So for those of you who are interested, this document is very much leaning into the Aparecida document. That was the Latin American bishops formulated that. So, summary and conclusion. The note does not introduce a new dogma, but clarifies existing teaching. We know we have 4 dogmas of the Blessed Mother, and if I go tomorrow to any parish, I would doubt that the majority of people know who those 4 dogmas are. So why a 5th one? There is nothing, the doctrine of Mary is not threatened in any way. I think by proclaiming a 5th dogma or making a title more accessible, the church would gain anything, or our pastoral. The note affirms Mary's role as mother of believers, model disciple, and our intercessor, but always in relation to Christ's unique mediating role. The note invites careful theological language and faithful devotion, and underlines that Marian devotion is a treasure of the Church when properly understood. So now I am eager to hear your discussions or your questions, your feedback, something I may not have covered or that is not understood correctly.
Thank you.
We can go. I have a next slide yet, Sergio. Okay, so my questions are: what does it mean to call Mary Mother of the Faithful People, and does that include her mediation and her co-redeeming action? How can we better promote a Christ-centered Marian devotion in our own life, and then also when speaking to others? And in what ways can we assist our parishes to understand Marian titles responsibly? And maybe the final and most important note, how does it affect our work with pilgrims, our groups, and introducing our shrine to the people? So thank you very much. And now I'm ready to answer questions. I try to answer. I don't know. You probably have a lot of complicated ones.
Thank you. No, sister, we have a number of folks online that are sending in questions. We also have a few here. I have one that I would just like to ask, and it's related to paragraph number 13 in the document, and this says that the cooperation of the mother with her son in the work of salvation has been taught by the magisterium of the church. As the Second Vatican Council states, quote, rightly, therefore, the Holy Fathers see Mary not merely as a passive instrument in the hands of God, but as freely cooperating in the work of human salvation through faith and obedience, end quote. And the article goes on to say this cooperation is present not only at Jesus's earthly life, at his conception, birth, death, and resurrection, but also throughout the life of the church. Do you see any kind of contradiction in between this document and what the Second Vatican Council was trying to say about Mary's work in human salvation?
No, I don't, because the fathers at Vatican II avoided the title Co-Redemptrix. They used Mediatrix, but not of all graces. They used Auxiliatrix and whatever you just mentioned. And I mentioned it before we started tonight, that whatever we say about the Blessed Mother, we should be able to say about ourselves. We also are called to cooperate. We also are mediators in daily life, but also with God. And you mentioned an important aspect, and that is obedience of faith. That is the most active way of cooperating. And I think Our Lady is the prime example for that. So obedience of faith is the most active way of being a disciple of Christ, of a follower of Christ. And the only, according to Gaudium et Spes, the best way of fulfilling our own mission in life. So these are important words: obedience of faith, discerning God's will in faith and acting upon it. And Mary did that, and thereby mediated the mediator of all grace.
Yeah, I think, Sister, this is reflected in one of the comments that have come in, that in any case, what we say, or what we can say, is that Mary desires the good for us, and she asks for it together with us.
Okay.
I think was a insightful comment that just came in. Some of the
But
other
also to know, that comment, what you quoted from Lumen Gentium, is that she mediates the grace for the church. But when we say of all graces, there was a time before the church existed, and that grace she did not mediate, right? She didn't mediate her own grace to be immaculately conceived, or the sacramental grace we receive. So that's why we have to be more nuanced.
Okay. A clarification is another comment coming in asking for a clarification on this point. Neither friendship with Jesus Christ nor the Trinitarian indwelling can be conceived of something that comes through Mary or the saints. Is that correct? Neither friendship with Jesus Christ nor the Trinitarian indwelling can be conceived of something that comes through Mary or the saints. Is that?
That is correct objectively. We receive God's indwelling through baptism, right? And then a person fosters friendship with Christ on his or her, as Pope Benedict says, each one has their unique way of fostering a friendship or communion with Christ. But that also includes for us here, through Mary. But it doesn't have to be.
Mm-hmm. Yes. Yeah.
While
Exactly.
a Marian way is, because, if you think about it, if you think of the new covenant, Mary does that representatively for all of us. So we all have to become like Mary to enter into that covenant with the bridegroom, like the bride and The church is the bride, Christ the bridegroom. So that Marian aspect is important, but we have to leave it up to the Holy Spirit how he guides people to Christ.
Yes, sister, I thought it was beautiful how you said in your opening remarks and called out the document saying that Mary is the most perfect expression of Christ's action that transforms humanity. Such a beautiful, beautiful statement. And that she is the feminine manifestation of all that Christ's grace can accomplish in a human being. So beautifully stated, and so true that Mary as our model is and our mother is such a gift to humanity. We've got a couple questions that are coming in, sister, that seem to be they're related to Schoenstatt, and I'm going to go ahead and just kind of bunch them both together because I think they're kind of asking the same question. One is our Schoenstatt devotion to Mary authentic? And the other is our Father Kentenich's declarations of the Blessed Mother still appropriate?
The answer is yes, a big yes. But let me explain that. So I mentioned before that Father Kentenich said our Marian devotion is Christ-centered. So in the 1950s, there was a huge discussion whether or not Mariology should be taught in seminaries as a unique course, not as in Christology or ecclesiology or eschatology, but a Mariological track, so to speak. And at that time, one had to find the Marian principle. And so the Marian principle is either Christ-centered, Mary is Christ-centered, therefore, and she's the most Christ-centered, or Mary is the member of the church, is the ecclesiotypical, it's called. And then there is also an anthropological Mariology. Mary is the perfect human being, right? So ours, in Schoenstatt, we have a Christ-centered Mariology. And Father Kentenich was always concerned when we have Christology without Mary, we may come up with our own Christ ideal and image, right? We can never separate Christ from his mother. So that was his huge concern. We see it in the Unity Cross. Mary from crypt to cross and beyond, now in eternity, they work together. So that was his concern. His Marian principle was that Mary is the permanent helpmate and associate in the entire work of redemption. And that is what Heavenwards deals with. And then we also have now, after this document or note was published, there was another note published now, maybe 2 weeks ago, on marriage and polygamy and polyamory. Maybe you have heard about it. Mm-hmm. And in the interview afterwards, Cardinal Victor Fernandez, who also signed responsible for this one, he said that we should never, it doesn't mean that we can no longer quote popes or fathers of the church or saints who have used the title Co-Redemptrix or Mediatrix of our graces. But he says from now on, meaning November 14th or whatever, it will not appear in any magisterial documents anymore. Mm-hmm. So that is the clarification that he gave in an interview. You can find that online. So, you know, John Paul II was someone who was very close to defining a fifth dogma, and was asked by Ratzinger to wait because it was just not clarified enough, the theology behind it, and therefore John Paul II used the title Co-Redemptrix even in his Redemptoris Mater encyclical. But at a certain point, I think the beginning of the new millennium, he didn't use it anymore.
Did Ratzinger argue that the term co-redemptrix was not found in Scripture or the writings of the Church Fathers, and did that somehow make it less of a doctrinal possibility?
It's a very complex issue, but yes, he was concerned that it could be easily misunderstood. The prefix co can mean co-pilot, co-worker, meaning you're on the same level as the other worker, the other pilot, the other redeemer. And that is what we never understood, those of us who are educated in Mary's position. But by our Protestant brothers and sisters, it caused a lot of anger, I would say. And so Cardinal Ratzinger, being the prefect of the Congregation of the Faith, had that more universal image. Pope John Paul II was a Polish man who was Marian from top to bottom, right? And so he even wanted to make it a dogma, believe it or not, that Mary dwells with Jesus in the tabernacle. And guess who stopped that? Also Cardinal Ratzinger. And he was a philosopher. He was not a theologian.
Okay, thank you, sister. That's beautiful. Something switching back here a little bit to Schoenstatt, to our faithful. A caller writes in, or rather, somebody writes in. Thanks for the presentation, Sister Danielle. Given the number of home shrines, what is the most effective strategy for guaranteeing proper Marian devotion or Mariology within them?
I wonder how many have the title Co-Redemptrix. I have not come across one. Mediatrix, yes. And these titles can remain even if you have it. But you have to know how to understand it correctly. And I hope tonight that came through, that you understand she is the mediatrix of all the graces that we as a family, that I as an individual want to receive. But these graces were merited by Christ and were interceded by the Blessed Mother for us, our family. If my home shrine is Mediatrix of Grace or Co-Redemptrix, it is an appeal to the family to also be more involved in the work of redemption, but always independence on Christ, right? So authentic devotion, as I mentioned before, can be read in Marialis Cultus. Very beautiful. There are some principles of Marian devotion. They should be scriptural, liturgical, Trinitarian, anthropological. Then also in Behold Your Mother, the letter that the US bishops wrote, the prayer, the Angelus prayer, which recalls the incarnation through Mary's fiat, when she literally mediated the mediator for us. These are all, we have to see it organically. That's what Schoenstatt is all about, right? Not mechanistic. And I think our church here in the United States also has become very mechanistic when we talk about the Blessed Mother. And so this document really can help us to study also more. We think we have a very personal devotion, but we have to know where's the foundation for it.
Thank you, sister. I want to just extend that again, just for our Schoenstatt faithful that are concerned, and to heavenwards. In other words, I think the question might be, are we praying anything in heavenwards that the church would not want us to pray? Are there any kinds of, looking over it, any kinds of adjustments or edits that have to make?
As I said before, Cardinal Fernandez made it clear we don't have to forbid now to read Redemptoris Mater from John Paul II, or whatever Bernard of Clairvaux said, or Thomas of Aquinas, or John Paul II. It is for the magisterial teaching that these titles will be avoided. I don't know if we have the title Co-Redemptrix in heavenwards. The heavenwards deals with Mary as associate and helpmate of Christ in the entire work of redemption. Mm-hmm. And so we have her mediating, we have her being the new Eve, the anti-diabolicum, and maybe also that she helps co-redeem us. But if we see it in the right concept, and maybe that is an appeal to us to have some workshops on heavenwards, to truly understand what heavenwards is all about.
Mm-hmm. Thank you, Sister. Again, I think here's another great question from our audience. And again, these are all along the same themes, Sister, but I think if we can kind of just keep clarifying, that it'll be helpful. The question is, in Schoenstatt, we speak of contribution to the capital of grace. How should we explain capital of grace in the light of this document?
Actually, I was hoping for that question. And because, yeah, it's so the Blessed Mother says, diligently bring me contributions to the capital of grace. And we know that our Schoenstatt shrines depend on their fruitfulness. The Schoenstatt mystery, the Schoenstatt secret depends on the fruitfulness of the Blessed Mother having her capital of grace. We know as good Catholics, and the Catechism teaches us, that every one of our good works is meritorious. And we can offer it to God for our own strengthening, our own holiness, for the deceased, but also for any other living person. And so there speaks nothing against it that we also offer it to the Blessed Mother, to any saint in the communion of saints. And also the capital of grace teaches us another theological concept, and that is representation. So when Father Kentenich went to Dachau, he did that representatively for us to ransom our inner freedom, if you remember the second milestone and its context. So in the communion of saints, a father or a mother who struggles with a child or a teenager can make sacrifices that that child shapes up, or for a dying person, that they have a better transit into eternity. So all of us can merit graces in this regard, or merit or make our good works meritorious, and we can offer them to the Blessed Mother, who knows best how to then distribute them, because she, as she did at the wedding at Cana, will say or will teach us whatever Christ will tell us to do, right? So in Schoenstatt, we are not so much concerned with a doctrinal concept, but with a pedagogical or psychological effect of our meritorious good works. We can offer them, and our shrines, and that God has obviously agreed to this first milestone of our history, because our shrines are tremendously fruitful because of the capital of grace. And so we can also say that this is the way to go for us as Schoenstatters.
Yeah. Sister, just in my mind, I'm thinking back to what you were saying earlier this evening about that we all have similar roles as not as Mediatrix, but you were saying earlier that we have roles similar to Mary in
What I
our.
was saying is, whatever we can say about Mary, we should be able to say about ourselves.
Can you expand on
But
that a
on a
little bit,
lower
sister?
level, on a
Yes,
lower
yeah,
level.
yes.
So we
Okay.
have 4 Marian dogmas, right? So Mary is the mother of God. St. Augustine says, Audemus dicere matres Christi. We dare to call ourselves mothers of Christ. And St. Augustine said that. And how is that true? Because each time we receive Holy Communion, Christ dwells within us. We are tabernacles. We are the monstrums.
Christ bearers, yeah.
Christ bearers. So Theotokos. So what I'm saying is, yes, we are Christ bearers like Mary, but on an endlessly lower level. Mary is perpetual virgin. Some of us live virginity, but each one of us has to be virginal in our relationship to Christ, as Mary was. So there is a spot within us that belongs only to God. And unless we nourish that, we become soulless, we become empty. So in this regard, the church too is mother and virgin, right? She keeps the teaching of the church spotless. And then Mary is immaculate. At our baptism, we too become immaculate, so to speak. And the baptismal rite says, take care that you take that dignity unstained to heaven. Meaning, thanks be to God, we have penance, we have reconciliation, because we stain our garment once in a while, right? Here again. And then Assumption, hopefully one day we will all meet in eternity, body and soul united. So when we say she is mediatrix, we can also be mediators and mediatrixes, right? When you ask me, please pray for my wife, my son, my whatever, I can do that. And then I become a mediatrix between you and God. Or I can, as I say, offer my merits to God. I can make up in the sufferings, in what is lacking in the sufferings of Christ. That's in Colossians. It's a saying by St. Paul, but that is subjective redemption. So whatever we say about Mary, tell me another title, we should also try to be, and especially us who are in a covenant of love with Mary. The more we love her, the more we become like her, and the more we become closer to her, and therefore, as you said before, become like an Altera Maria.
Thank you. Sister, we have about 6 minutes before we close. Do you have any thoughts that you'd like to share with us to wrap this up? Obviously, we want to say a prayer at the end.
Sergio, if you want to share that last slide I had, if that's possible, because here, the last one, after the thank you. More, further. Okay. Here we have a text from Father Kentenich that he said we can all read in Mary, our Mother and Educator, from the Lenten Sermons in 1954 in Milwaukee. He says, as Co-Redemptrix under the cross, she has merited all the graces we have ever received. And as mediatrix of all graces, she channels these graces to us from heaven in her kindness. For this too, Mother Thrice Admirable, we thank you from the bottom of our hearts. Even the title Dispensatrix of all graces does not have a strange sound when we realize that Mary is in truth the mother of all the redeemed Christians who are entrusted to her care. Mary's motherhood necessitates her mediating office and vice versa. Her universal motherhood encompasses her universal mediating position. So this was said in 1954, which ended the 100 years of high Mariology. In 1954, we have the title Mary, Queen of all creation. So the Queenship of Mary was introduced in 1954. From 1854 to 1954, we have what we call a Marian centennial, so to speak. And the people sitting in the pews at Holy Cross at that time, I would think, would not have had a problem with that. So that's why also our times change. And I'm sure this is not the last word on Mary's work in redemption. But for the time being, and maybe it's an appeal to all of us, to catechize ourselves better, and also wherever we are teaching or being CCD teachers or in the OCIA, whatever it's called, to really present Mary's position as it is objectively and how we can unite with her in the covenant of love, be anchored in the covenant, and then imitate her in her mediating and co-redeeming work of redemption. That would be my closing. And I would like to thank everyone who participated and also wish you a blessed Advent. On Monday, we celebrate Immaculate Conception. We want to thank the Blessed Mother for having said her fiat. And in this way, she mediated the Redeemer to us.
Thank you. We'll close with a prayer. My Queen, my Mother, I give myself entirely to you, and to show my devotion to you, I consecrate to you this day my eyes, my ears, my mouth, my heart, my entire self without reserve. As I am your own, my good mother, guard me and defend me as your property and possession. Amen. Good night, everyone, and thank you very much for joining us.
Good night.